Hey guys, tonight we slip into a tale that's warm, flickering with firelight, and just a little smoke-scented. You're standing in the middle of a noise storm, gods bickering, thunder cracking, celestial egos bouncing off marble walls. And yet, there you are, quietly tending the flame in the center of it all. This is the story of Hestia, the goddess who didn't want glory or power or a war chariot with gold rims. She just wanted everyone to calm down, maybe stop yelling for 5 minutes, and let her enjoy the sound of her own thoughts. But of course, when you're born into the most absurdly dramatic divine family in history, peace and quiet is more of a dream than a lifestyle. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you are right now. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born into the storm. Not a storm of clouds and thunder, but of prophecy and paranoia. Your parents, Cronus and Rhea, aren't exactly the poster couple for healthy family dynamics. Cronus, your charming father, has a habit of swallowing his children whole. Not because he's hungry, mind you, but because he's terrified of being overthrown. There's a prophecy involved, there always is, and it whispers that one of his kids is going to rise up and dethrone him. You, Hestia, are the firstborn, which means you're also the first snack. The moment you're born, you're scooped up and gulped down like a divine vitamin. No lullabies, no soft blankets, just the warm, squishy confines of Cronus' stomach. It's not exactly a luxury suite, and you'll soon have company, 5 more siblings, to be exact. Now, most people would panic, maybe scream, maybe plot a stomach-based escape plan, but not you. From the very beginning, you're calm. You don't know why, but you feel like someone has to be. The others, Hera, Demeter, Hades, Poseidon, they wriggle, they shout, they scheme. And eventually, the youngest, Zeus, manages to avoid the whole digestion fiasco by being hidden away and raised in secret. Historians still argue whether the story of Cronus devouring his children is symbolic of time consuming all things, or just ancient Greeks being a little too creative with metaphors. Either way, it's one heck of a family origin story. Eventually, Zeus grows up and stages the ultimate sibling rescue. He tricks Cronus into vomiting you all back up. Not the most glamorous return, but hey, at least it's better than spending eternity in digestive limbo. One by one, each of you emerges, blinking in the light of the world for the first time. And sure, everyone's a little gooey, a little disoriented, but mostly alive and surprisingly well-adjusted, considering the rebellion is swift, filled with lightning bolts and titan tantrums. You watch it unfold, not with bloodlust or ambition, but with a quiet kind of observation. You're not interested in who gets the throne or who has the flashiest domain. You're just tired. You want stability, warmth, something that's not constantly on the verge of exploding. So when the dust settles and the Olympian Council starts picking out their roles like kids, claiming beds at summer camp, you step back. Zeus becomes king, Poseidon takes the ocean, Hades claims the underworld. Hera, your sister, becomes queen and goddess of marriage, because irony is alive and well. Demeter gets the harvest. And you pick something humble, something essential. The hearth. It's not glamorous, it doesn't come with a scepter or a Delix temple package, but it's everywhere. Every home, every city, every sacred offering begins with fire. And you, Hestia, become the guardian of that flame. Not just the literal one, but the symbolic one too. The warmth of home, the peace of a quiet room, the comfort of knowing someone's always tending the fire. There's a fringe theory, more poetic than historical, that says you chose the hearth because you were the first to be swallowed and the last to be released. You saw too much of the dark and decided the world needed more light. Whether that's true or not, it sticks with people. It sticks with you. And so, while the other gods strut around Mount Olympus with their thunderbolts and tridents and peacock chariots, you sit quietly by the fire. Not because you're weak or shy, but because you understand something they don't power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it's just a steady flame in the middle of a storm. You don't get the flashy worship songs or the dramatic myths. No one's writing epic poems about the time Hestia made a really excellent stew. But that's fine by you. In fact, it's kind of the point. You're not here for the spotlight. You're here to make sure there's always a light on, even when everyone else forgets how dark it can get. And if you're wondering whether choosing a low drama path actually kept the chaos away, well, let's just say this story's only getting started. You don't remember the moment you were swallowed, but you definitely remember being inside. It's dark in a way that isn't just about light. It's like the world forgot how to exist around you. You float weightless in a stomach that doesn't rumble or digest, because this is a god's body, and apparently, divine digestion is more like a holding cell than a furnace. There's a strange sort of silence in there, like being underwater but without the pressure. Over time, you're not alone. One by one, your siblings arrive, Hera fussing immediately, Demeter asking questions no one can answer, Hades sulking in a corner, or at least you assume it's a corner. It's hard to tell in the gut of a titan. Poseidon arrives last, all flailing limbs and complaints. You've become a weird sort of family unit inside a very literal stomach. It's not cozy, but it's not entirely terrible either. You manage to stay calm because that's just your nature. Someone has to be. You're the one who tells Hera to stop panicking, who distracts Demeter with imaginary garden layouts, who offers comforting silence rather than advice. Even Hades grudgingly appreciates the stillness you provide. You are, in a way, the hearth even here. Now, let's talk about the mechanics of being swallowed by a titan. Historians still argue whether this was meant to be literal or metaphorical. Was Cronus actually gulping his infants like divine tic-tacs? Or was this an elaborate symbol for the cyclical nature of time consuming its own creations? A few fringe theorists even suggest this was an ancient metaphor for reincarnation or transformation. Regardless, for you, it feels very real. And just when you think this is your forever, trapped in some kind of God's stomach purgatory, something changes. A rumble, a shift, a sense of movement from outside. Then, like a divine elevator ride in reverse, you're hurtling upward, out of the darkness, and back into the world. Zeus, your baby brother, the one who escaped, has returned. And unlike the rest of you, he's had time to grow, to plan, to gather thunder. He tricks Cronus into vomiting you all up. It's not glamorous. There's no sparkling magic or elegant escape. It's a lot of gagging, a bit of divine reflux, and suddenly you're blinking in the sun, covered in Titan bile and wondering what year it is. You're the first one in. You're the last one out. There's something poetic about that. Even if you're not really the poetic type, you don't get much time to adjust before the war begins. The Titanomachy, they'll call it later. 10 years of divine warfare, thunder versus stone, sky against earth. You fight, of course. Everyone fights. But you don't love it. While Zeus is hurling lightning and Poseidon is summoning tidal waves, you're shielding the wounded, tending to fires, rescuing the fallen. You fight like a healer, like someone who doesn't want to win so much as end the fighting. There's a moment, one you never talk about, where you come face to face with a titan. Maybe it's Apatus, maybe Coeus. The details blur in the memory, but you don't strike. You just hold your ground, radiating calm, and for a heartbeat, they hesitate. That pause saves your life. Maybe it saves theirs too. Eventually, the war ends. The Olympians win. The Titans are cast down into Tartarus, and a new order begins. And this is where the real chaos starts. Zeus, fresh off his victory and full of main character energy, starts handing out titles like party favors. You're offered a seat among the 12 Olympians, a throne in the Golden Palace atop Mount Olympus. You accept, but only under one condition. You get to choose your domain. Everyone expects you to take something dramatic. Maybe the moon, maybe the stars, but you ask for the hearth. There's a beat of stunned silence. Even Hermes stops chewing whatever enchanted snack he's currently munching on. The hearth, the kitchen fire, that's it. Yes, you say? That's it. And so it begins. While your siblings bicker over territory, Poseidon sulking about not getting the sky, Hera bristling at Zeus philandering right out of the gate, you start building something quieter. You place the first flame in the center of Olympus. It doesn't roar, it doesn't crackle loudly, it just glows, warm, steady, comforting. You become the goddess of the hearth, and with it, the goddess of the home, of peace, of domestic life. Not exactly the kind of thing that makes headlines in myth, but you don't mind. You know that real power isn't always loud. Here's a quirky tidbit: in some ancient households, people would literally apologize to the hearth fire before leaving for long journeys, like it was a slightly judgmental grandmother. Sorry for the mess, Hestia. Be back soon. It's oddly charming. Your presence becomes a quiet constant. Every home in Greece has a hearth, and every hearth has a bit of you in it. When people cook, when they gather, when they huddle around the fire on cold nights, they're with you. They might not build you giant temples like they do for Athena or Apollo, but they whisper your name more often than any of them. And yet, even now, you can feel the tension building. Olympus is not a quiet place. It's a palace of ego and grudges and never-ending drama. You can already tell your siblings are going to make this interesting. But for now, you sit at the center of it all, flame flickering gently, and you think, maybe I can make this work. You don't get long to enjoy the post-war quiet before things start heating up, figuratively, of course. The fire you tend is always just the right amount of warmth, but the atmosphere on Olympus, that's another story. Now that the Titans are safely locked away in Tartarus, and the Olympians are comfortably installed in their gleaming thrones, you'd think things might calm down. Peace, prosperity, celestial harmony. But no, Olympus is like a reality show that no one asked for. Everyone's got something to prove, and no one can resist the urge to monologue about it. Meanwhile, you're just trying to keep the fire going. Your hearth sits in the very center of the grand Olympian hall, a low, steady blaze that never dies, never flickers too high, never smokes up the curtains. It's the heart of Olympus, and by extension, the heart of Greek civilization. Every council meeting, every divine banquet, every awkward family intervention takes place around it. Which means, of course, that you can't avoid the drama, even if you try. You're the goddess of home and peace, but Olympus doesn't make that easy. Take Zeus, for example. He's barely settled into his throne before he starts throwing thunderbolts around like wedding confetti. If it's not mortals disrespecting him, it's Hera catching him sneaking off to inspect some nymph's olive grove. Again, you try not to get involved, but when you're literally in the middle of the room, it's hard not to be included. Hera storms in, hair blazing like a solar eclipse, demanding justice. Zeus counters with his king of the gods voice, which is just his normal voice but louder. And you calmly stir the embers, pretending this isn't your third divine argument of the day. Historians still argue whether your role as hearth goddess made you the emotional center of Olympus, or just its unwilling therapist. Either way, you become the quiet eye in the storm, the place where gods come to vent, sulk, or occasionally cry into a goblet of ambrosia. And it's not just the big names. Hermes, the messenger god, often plops down beside you after a long day of delivering divine memos and stealing random livestock. He talks fast, eats faster, and disappears just as quickly, leaving behind a faint smell of roasted figs and a half-finished story about a turtle heir. Then there's Artemis, who's always grumbling about how no one respects her vow of chastity. You nod politely, inwardly thinking, welcome to the club. Ares drops by when he's not busy getting beat up by mortals or losing arguments to Athena. He's all swagger and bruises and blood-stained tunics, but every now and then he sits by your fire and says nothing, just stares into the flames like he's trying to remember what peace feels like. And despite all this, no one truly sees you the way they see the others. There's no grand temple with 100-foot statues of you, no epic tales of heroism or scandal. You're not the goddess of war or wisdom or the sun. You're the goddess of sitting still, the goddess of breathing deep, of soup, of silence. But here's the thing, even the gods need silence. Even the gods need soup. One particularly exhausting day, after Medusa's latest PR disaster and Apollo's ill-advised poetry reading, which nearly caused a muse mutiny, you find yourself alone by the hearth. For a moment, Olympus is quiet. Really quiet. You sip something warm and honeyed from a shallow cup and let your shoulders relax, just a little. And that's when you start to wonder, how long can you keep this up? Because here's a quirky little fact: you're the only Olympian who never leaves their post. You never go gallivanting off to seduce mortals or meddle in wars. You stay, always. Watching, listening, tending the flame. Sometimes you wonder what the world looks like beyond the clouds. You've heard Demeter talk about the golden fields, the scent of ripe grain in summer. You've seen Athena's city rise from a rocky hill, watched it from afar as mortals build temples and statues and bustle through markets. But you remain rooted. And there's a reason for that. You know deep down that if you leave, even for a moment, the center shifts, the balance tips. You are the quiet that holds the loud together. The pause between thunderclaps. The stillness that reminds everyone what they're fighting for, even if they've forgotten. Of course, not everyone appreciates that. There's a fringe belief among a few lesser gods that you're just there. That your fire is symbolic, not powerful, that you're more mascot than deity. You hear them whisper sometimes, minor wind gods with too much time on their hands. You don't argue. You've never needed to. Because when the storms rage, when the divine politics get too tangled, everyone ends up back at your hearth, warming their hands, pretending they're not grateful for the stillness. One night, Zeus himself sits beside you. No thunderbolts, no dramatic declarations, just a tired king and a goddess who doesn't ask questions. He watches the flame for a long time and says, "You're the only one who never asks for anything." You smile, small and warm. "That's because I already have what I want." "Peace?" he asks. You nod. He doesn't say anything else, and for once, that's enough. It's not the glory most deities crave. But for you, it's everything. You keep the hearth burning, always. It's more than a flame. It's a presence, something sacred and quiet in a world that rarely lowers its voice. You glow softly in the center of Olympus, your fire casting gentle light on polished marble and divine egos alike. And yet, even with the eternal flame flickering peacefully, the gods can't help themselves. The drama finds you. You never seek it out, but it always circles back. One of the lesser-known facts about being the hearth goddess is that your fire is omnipresent. Not just in Olympus, but in every home, temple, and city across Greece. That means people are constantly bringing their problems right to your doorstep. Or, more accurately, to your fire. It's like being the only barista in a coffee shop that never closes, where every customer wants to cry about their ex. And the worst part, you're really good at listening. Take Hera, for example, queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, and chronically furious wife of Zeus. She visits often, usually after one of Zeus' business trips turns out to involve a mortal woman and a very suspicious golden shower. You don't ask questions. You just let her sit beside the flame, steam rising from her eyes, and let her talk. You nod. You pass her a cup of warm honeyed milk. She knows you won't repeat a word of it. That's the unspoken deal. You're the hearth. What's said at the fire stays at the fire. Hera isn't the only one. Az drops in after every battle, his armor still dusty, his pride slightly more bruised than his body. He doesn't say much. Just sits there, watching the flames like they might tell him why war never fills the hole he's been dragging around since childhood. Even Athena, the untouchable goddess of wisdom and war strategy, slips in sometimes. You don't expect her to. She always walks in briskly, like she has a reason. Just passing through, she'll mutter, but she lingers. Watches the flame. Maybe she's calculating the heat distribution. Maybe she's remembering something she won't say aloud. And then there's Demeter, your sister. She brings you offerings, fresh loaves of bread, garlands of flowers, whatever's in season. She doesn't stay long, not usually. But when Persephone disappears for the first time, when Hades drags her down to the underworld, and the earth grows cold with her grief, she comes to you and sobs. You hold her. You don't say everything will be okay, because you're not sure it will be. But you keep the fire burning a little brighter that night. Historians still argue whether your hearth was symbolic of divine order, or a literal place of emotional refuge. But you know the truth, it's both. It's a space where gods can be vulnerable without consequence, where power and pride melt away, just for a while. You don't keep score. You don't judge. You just absorb it all. Tears, tantrums, secrets. Like the fire absorbs the smoke. It's not just the gods either. Mortals have a way of reaching you too. Every time a new city is founded, they light a flame from your sacred hearth and carry it to their new home. Every sacrifice begins and ends with a pinch of grain tossed into your fire. They might not build you grand temples, but they never forget you. There's a fringe practice among certain rustic villages where people whisper their deepest fears into the smoke of their hearth fires, believing the words will drift up to you and vanish before they can do harm. You don't know if it works, but sometimes when the wind shifts just right, you think you hear them. But peace isn't easy to maintain. The gods have long memories and short tempers, but you don't take sides, but that doesn't stop them from trying to recruit you. Hermes once tried to bribe you with a loaf of enchanted bread. It sang folk songs when sliced. You thanked him, then gave it to Apollo, who was going through a bardic identity crisis. Even Artemis, usually too cool to care, once asked if you just casually mentioned to Zeus that she was doing a great job upholding her vow of chastity. You didn't. But you did hum approvingly when she passed by, and that seemed to satisfy her. Sometimes, you wonder what would happen if you snapped. If you hurled a ladle across the hall and shouted, I am not your celestial therapist. But you never do. Not because you're weak, but because your strength is in your restraint. You've seen what happens when gods let their emotions run wild. You've seen cities crumble and oceans rise. You know that the real miracle isn't the lightning, or the shape-shifting, or the immortality. It's the stillness. The choice to breathe instead of shout. To listen instead of strike. One evening, as the sun sets over Olympus in streaks of rosy gold and fire orange, you add a small log to the hearth. The flame catches immediately, curling upward in a gentle spiral. You sit down beside it, alone for once, and just watch. This is your moment of peace. And you know it won't last, because footsteps echo down the marble hall, and two voices, loud, charming, disturbingly confident, are heading your way. Poseidon and Apollo, and they're about to make things complicated. You hear them before you see them. Poseidon's swaggering footsteps and Apollo's melodic hum echoing through the marble halls like the opening act of a very bad idea. You already know this is going to be trouble, because when two of the most dramatic gods on Olympus show up together, it usually means someone's about to start a fire, and unfortunately, you're already in charge of one. They strut into the hearth chamber like they own the place, which is funny, because you do. Poseidon tosses his trident onto your couch like it's a coat rack, and Apollo flashes that blinding, sun-god smile that makes mortals faint and satyrs compose awkward ballads. Hestia, says Poseidon, grinning with shark-like charm. We've come with a proposal. You raise an eyebrow. You're already regretting this. Apollo steps forward, adjusting his laurel crown like he's about to give a TED talk on seduction. It's time you considered marriage. You blink. You're the goddess of the hearth, of inner peace and domestic stillness. You've literally built your identity on not getting swept up in romantic melodrama. And now here are two of your brothers, yes, brothers, trying to pitch you like a prize in a divine dating game. No, you say flatly. But you haven't even heard our offers. Poseidon protests. I can give you the sea, the endless depths, a kingdom of coral and silence. I can give you music, Apollo cuts in, light, prophecy, golden chariots, poetry. Not helping, you mutter. They start bickering immediately, each trying to outshine the other. Poseidon conjures a miniature ocean wave that splashes your hearth, and you nearly throw a sandal at him. Apollo starts tuning a lyre with an expression that says, I'm about to serenade you, and you'll love it. You don't. Historians still argue whether this love triangle was a serious divine proposal or just a metaphor for Hestia rejecting chaos in favor of peace. The records are vague, the myths are contradictory. One version suggests a full-blown contest between the two gods, complete with gifts and rituals. Another version says you walked out of the room before they even finished talking. The truth. You politely told them both to take their proposals and stuff them into the nearest amphora. I have made a vow, you say calmly, to remain untouched, unmarried, unentangled. Poseidon blinks. Wait forever. Apollo frowns. Even if it's me, you nod. Especially if it's you. There's a long beat of silence. The hearth crackles gently, as if applauding your decision. Then Poseidon shrugs and says, well, worth a try. And Apollo, bless his self-esteem, has the audacity to look personally insulted by your inner peace before storming off in a very poetic huff. You're left alone again. The fire dancing quietly, the room finally still. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Here's a quirky little detail in later centuries. Some households would hang a small charm above their hearths shaped like a flame wrapped in a ribbon. An ode to your vow of chastity, symbolizing the idea that peace is something you protect, not something given. It's kind of sweet, in a please leave me alone kind of way. Your decision to remain celibate isn't just a personal choice, it becomes part of your divine identity. You're not the one who got away, you're the one who never played. And that, somehow, makes you even more powerful. You're the still point in a spinning world. The unclaimed, the untouched. The goddess who said no when everyone else said yes, and meant it. Of course, that doesn't stop others from trying. Hermes writes you a love poem once. It's terrible. You burn it, gently. Ares bets someone 100 drachmae that he can win you over in a week. He lasts 2 days before giving up and blaming emotional constipation. Even mortals get weird about it. There's a fringe myth that claims you once had a secret affair with a mortal shepherd, and that you set his flock on fire when he ghosted you. It's completely fake, but it's oddly popular in rural taverns. You don't bother correcting it. Let them have their stories. Because the truth is, you don't need romance. You don't need a partner. You have the fire. You have yourself. And that's enough. It's not a lack of love. It's a different kind of love. You love balance. You love warmth. You love the way people soften when they sit by a fire, the way silence becomes sacred in the right space. You love the idea that not everything has to be loud or grand or dramatic to matter. But still, you sometimes wonder, just for a moment, what it would be like to fall, to be swept up, to lose control. Then you remember Apollo's smug grin and Poseidon's seaweed-scented ego, and you're cured. You return to your hearth, place another olive branch in the flame as an offering to yourself, and feel the warmth rise gently. Outside, the gods are already onto their next argument. Something about ownership of a newly discovered island. Or maybe who gets credit for inventing cheese. You don't care. You're at the center of Olympus, untouched by the chaos, wrapped in the glow of your own choosing, and for the first time that day, you smile. It's barely noon on Olympus, and already someone's weeping, someone else is yelling, and a third someone is challenging a fourth someone to a duel over a stolen chariot design. You don't even look up anymore when a goblet crashes or a thunderbolt singes the ceiling. You just stir the hearth, add another log, and make sure nothing important is on fire. Yet, you've become, unintentionally, the family therapist of the Greek pantheon. It starts small. Just Hera, again, showing up after another one of Zeus's, so it turns out she was actually a cow. Not a woman kind of stories. You don't ask. You just hand her a cushion and let her vent. Then Demeter comes by, telling you about Persephone's latest underworld poetry phase. She's wearing all black and writing about shadows. I think she's in love with a ghost. Again you nod. Offer some honey cakes, don't judge. But soon, it's everyone. Ares storms in because Athena stole his battle plan and made it better. He slams his sword down like he's expecting you to agree that strategy is less important than brute force. You just raise an eyebrow, and he slumps into a chair, muttering about how unfair life is when your sister keeps outwitting you. Even Artemis comes by, which is surprising because she's usually off hunting or pretending not to care about anything. But she needs to vent too, usually about Apollo. He won't stop singing about the sun. Like, we get it, you're radiant. You're not a trained counselor. You don't have a clipboard or a couch. But people keep coming to you because you don't interrupt. You don't try to fix them. You just hold space. Like the hearth itself, you're a constant. Warm, predictable, unchanging. There's a fringe scholarly theory that your role wasn't just spiritual, but psychological. That you functioned as an emotional stabilizer for the entire pantheon, preventing them from imploding under the weight of their own nonsense. Honestly, it tracks. And while it's nice to be needed, it also means you're absorbing a lot. You're the only one who doesn't unload. The only one who doesn't scream or sulk. You just carry it, like a pot on the fire, always simmering, never boiling over. You don't complain. That would defeat the point. But sometimes, after a particularly chaotic day, like the time Dionysus accidentally turned half the nymphs into grapevines, you sit alone by the fire and let yourself sigh. Just once, quietly. Because the truth is, you are tired. Not the kind of tired a nap fixes. The kind of tired that comes from being the only one who holds everything together, while everyone else is busy unraveling. And yet, you keep doing it. Because you've seen what happens when the center collapses. When there's no calm in the storm, when the fire goes out, you remember the Titanomachy. The screams, the lightning, the raw chaos of gods and titans tearing the sky apart. You remember the coldness of Cronus' stomach, and the way it felt to be forgotten. You swore, when you chose your domain, that you'd never let things fall into that kind of darkness again. So you stay, you listen, you tend the fire. A typical day might go something like this morning. Hermes bursts in, babbling about a goat that learned to talk and is now suing him for emotional damages. You listen, offer him a fig, he steals 3 and leaves. Midday Aphrodite floats in, trailing rose petals and sighs. As won't commit, Hephaestus is still mad, and honestly, I just want someone to rub my feet. You nod sympathetically. Offer her a cushion. She cries. You hand her a handkerchief. She uses it to reapply lipstick and winks on her way out. Afternoon, Athena shows up with a scroll of military strategies, asking for your calm perspective. Which is code for tell me I'm right without sounding smug. You do. She thanks you with a nod that almost resembles affection. Evening Dionysus crashes through your chamber, trailing grape juice and satyrs. He insists on throwing an impromptu celebration in your honor. You gently redirect the party to the garden. where the noise won't scorch your drapes. One satyr tries to roast marshmallows in your eternal flame. You redirect that too, with a ladle. And through all of this, the fire never dims, neither do you. Historians still argue whether your divine power was passive or active. Were you simply the hearth, or were you the force that made Olympus feel like home? The answer, of course, is yes. Because a hearth isn't just a fireplace. It's a center. A place people gather, return to. A place that forgives, even when it's exhausted. You've become indispensable. Not because you demand it, but because everyone realizes, eventually, that without you, everything falls apart. Your siblings are gods of incredible, terrifying power, but they need you to remind them what it's all for. You're the one who makes Olympus more than just a shiny palace in the clouds. You make it livable, bearable, and sometimes, when no one's around, you let yourself smile at that. It's not flashy, it won't make it into epic poems, but it matters. You watch the fire tonight, the flames soft and golden. Outside, the stars blink like sleepy gods of their own. The wind rustles the curtains. Somewhere a peacock screeches, probably Hera's. You close your eyes for just a second, and in that breath you feel it. Not the weight of everyone else's troubles, but the warmth of your own strength. You are the hearth, unshaken, unmoving, unseen, maybe, but unnever unnoticed. You're stirring the hearth when you hear it. The unmistakable sound of clinking wine goblets, laughter that's a little too loud, and the distant bleat of a goat playing a pan flute. You sigh. Not again. The door bursts open, and in he comes Dionysus. Crowned with ivy, cheeks flushed pink, and followed by a trail of equally tipsy satyrs and maenads who are throwing flower petals like confetti. The smell of fermented fruit hits you like a chariot, sweet, sticky, and dangerously carefree. Hestia, he sings, spinning dramatically into your chamber like he's entering a theater stage. My radiant flame, my still and silent sister! I'm moving in! You blink. You're what? I'm joining the 12, he declares, arms wide as if expecting applause. Zeus just told me. Said I needed a throne. Said someone had to make room. And guess who's too polite to say no? You stare at him for a long moment. Then you glance at your throne. It's small, tucked between Demeters and Hermes. Carved with olive branches and smooth from centuries of being unoccupied more than occupied. You've only ever sat there when protocol demanded it. You've never needed it. Not really. Dionysus is watching you now, eyes bright with wine and something else. Nervousness, maybe. Hope. He's not malicious. Just chaotic. You sip your tea. Then you nod. Take it, you say, voice calm as ever. It's yours. There's a beat of stunned silence, like Olympus just forgot how to breathe. Really? Dionysus asks, blinking. Just like that. You smile. Just like that. He hugs you, which is very Dionysus of him. Dramatic and slightly damp. A satyr yells, "Sakpapai!" And you have to gently redirect the entire conga line out of your chamber before they light your curtains on fire with their ceremonial torches. Historians still argue whether this moment marked a shift in divine hierarchy or was just another example of your incredible patience. But what they all agree on is that it was unprecedented. No one gives up a throne on Olympus. Ever. And yet, you did. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to know when to let go. You never liked the throne anyway. Too high. Too showy. The hearth is your true seat, and it's not something anyone can take. Not with a title, not with a party, and not with a wine-stained decree. So now, Dionysus is officially one of the 12 Olympians. There's a new throne, wreathed in ivy and occasionally sticky. The other gods are confused, mildly scandalized, and, secretly, relieved. Because they know you'll still be there, still watching, still tending the flame. What they don't realize is that this changes things for you too. Without the throne, you become freer than ever. You're no longer bound by status or seating charts. You're not part of the power plays or the debates. You float just outside the official structure, like a quiet guardian no one dares challenge. And yes, Dionysus moving in does come with side effects. For one, there are now grapevines growing through the marble columns of Olympus, which is technically a structural hazard. The break room has been converted into a tasting room. There's a lyre-playing goat named Steve who insists on narrating meetings in rhymed verse. You adapt. You move your hearth slightly off-center, still central, but no longer in the line of fire or wind. You reinforce your flame with a new kind of magic, one that resists drunken hiccups and deflects errant sparks. And you watch Dionysus struggle to fit in, to be both wild and divine, joyful and responsible. You see him try to earn the respect of gods who still see him as a party trick. And you, the goddess who gave up her seat without fanfare, become the only one who truly treats him like he belongs. One night, after a particularly chaotic banquet that involved a flaming goat, an impromptu play about Zeus' love life, spoiler, it was not flattering, and a satyr stuck in a wine barrel, Dionysus finds you alone by the hearth. He sits beside you, quiet for once. Why did you do it, he asks. You look at the fire. Because I didn't need it. He nods slowly. I don't think I do either. But I want to prove I deserve it. You don't have to prove anything, you say softly. Just keep the fire alive in your own way. He grins. With wine, you laugh, an actual laugh, which surprises even you. Sure, with wine. There's a quirky human tradition that starts centuries later lighting hearth fires with wine-soaked wood on the feast of Dionysus, believing it to be a blessing from both him and you. It's smoky, inefficient, and smells like burnt raisins, but it's oddly beautiful. You didn't lose anything when you gave up your throne. You gained something far better. You became untouchable. Not in the way Athena is, with her armor and logic. Not like Ares, with his aggression. But in the way of someone who has nothing left to prove, nothing to fight for. Someone who simply is. You are the hearth, and no one can take that from you. You've been a goddess for centuries now, and you've seen it all. Wars, weddings, wild parties, dramatic exits, and even more dramatic returns. But there's one thing you've never seen, a marketing campaign for yourself. Let's be honest, when it comes to divine branding, you're not exactly trending. Athena, of course, has her gleaming temples and golden statues. People name cities after her. She gets olive trees, owls, and a whole army of philosophers quoting her like she invented logic. Aphrodite, she has seashells, doves, and enough perfumes to drown a minor demigod. Even Ares, who loses more battles than he wins, has entire cults dedicated to his bad boy energy. And you're the fireplace. Not even the flashy kind with mantels and carvings. Just a quiet, steady presence in every home, glowing softly while everyone else gets the spotlight. There's something kind of hilarious about it, really. You're arguably the most worshipped goddess in Greece, because every single household honors you every single day. And yet your name barely makes it into the myths. No monsters slain in your name. No love triangles involving swans. No epic tales of you disguising yourself as a mortal to test humanity's kindness. Just warmth, and bread, and quiet. Historians still argue whether your low profile was a deliberate choice, or simply the result of patriarchal storytelling priorities. AKA, ancient poets thought fire was boring unless it exploded. But fringe scholars have a different theory. They say your absence from the myths is itself a kind of power. You were too sacred to be reduced to drama. Too omnipresent to need a shrine. You kind of like that idea. Still, there are moments when the lack of recognition stings just a little. Like when you pass by yet another temple dedication to Apollo and his golden hair, and you think, wow, must be nice to be worshipped for your cheekbones and not, holding civilization together. There's a particularly awkward moment during a festival in Athens. One where all the gods are being honored with statues, songs, and sacrifices. You're there, of course, not as a guest of honor, but as the literal hearth fire at the center of the celebration. People toss offerings into your flame, whisper your name, bow with reverence. But when the bard starts singing, your name isn't in the verses. You don't say anything. You just keep the fire burning. Then there's the time Hermes, always the mischief maker, tries to cheer you up. He proposes a rebranding. Hestia, he says, lounging upside down on your couch, you need a tagline, something catchy. You raise an eyebrow. I'm the goddess of the hearth, Hermes. What kind of tagline would that be? He thinks. How about Hestia, keeping things toasty since the dawn of time? You blink. Okay, he says, waving his hands. Too modern. What about Hestia, the flame you forgot you needed? You stare at him, he grins. Tough crowd. There's actually a quirky little festival in a remote mountain village where they do sing songs about you. But they're weirdly specific. One of them is a lullaby about cleaning ash from the hearth and asking you not to judge the soot stains. It's oddly touching. And then there are the cities. Every time a new Greek colony is founded, they take a small flame from your hearth in the mother city and carry it to the new land. That little fire becomes the seed of the new hearth, the center of the new home. Every time that happens, you feel a flicker in your soul. A quiet ping, like a bell rung softly across the sea. You don't need temples. You are the temple. You live in every fire lit with love, every meal cooked for family, every quiet night when someone stares into the embers and feels safe. But still, sometimes you wonder what it would be like to have your own statue. Something tall and beautiful, maybe holding a flame in one hand and a loaf of bread in the other. You'd call it serenity in marble. Maybe someone would finally notice that your hair curls in the shape of fire. Maybe they'd realize that your silence isn't absence. It's presence, deep and constant. You sigh, not out of bitterness, just wistfulness. You know your worth. You just wish more people did. Then, one day, a little girl sneaks into the Olympian Hall during one of the quieter mornings. She's immortal. Probably wandered in through some half-forgotten portal the gods keep forgetting to lock. She's holding a piece of bread and a small clay cup filled with oil. She walks right past Zeus, past Athena, past the golden statues and the gleaming thrones. She kneels in front of your hearth and sets down the bread and oil carefully, reverently. For Hestia, she whispers, because you help Mama's soup taste good, and Papa says you keep our house warm. Your heart, immortal, eternal, unflappable, aches just a little. You don't say anything. You just make the flame flicker a little brighter, just for her. She smiles like she's seen a miracle, and then she's gone. You sit by the fire for a long time after that, because that's your kind of worship. Not statues or feasts, but quiet offerings from small hands. The kind of devotion that isn't loud, but lasts. You're there when the first fire is lit. Not the very first fire ever. That one belongs to Prometheus, of course, and don't even get started on that family drama. But the first fire offered to the gods, that one's yours, always has been. Every ritual, every sacrifice, every ceremonial meal begins and ends with you. Before Zeus gets his thunderous share, before Athena gets her battle hymns, before Aphrodite gets her sweet-smelling incense, it's Hestia who is honored first and last. The flame must be lit, and the flame must be you. Mortals don't always understand the weight of this. They don't sing your name in the streets or paint your likeness on temple walls. But they do whisper your name when they light the kindling. They do bow their heads when they toss the first pinch of barley into the flames. It's small, quiet reverence, but it's constant. It's everywhere. Historians still argue whether this ritual precedence was symbolic or practical. Some say it was a nod to your purity, your untouched nature, the divine embodiment of order and peace. Others suggest it was more pragmatic: no fire, no sacrifice. No sacrifice, no gods. You were the divine ignition switch, the sacred pilot light. You don't care why. You just feel it. Every time a fire is lit in your name, you feel it ripple through you. Not like lightning, more like a warm breeze through your bones. It doesn't matter if it's in a marble temple or a clay hut. If there's a fire, and it's lit with intention, you are there. And the mortals, they adore you, not with parades or epics, but with consistency. You're the goddess of the daily, the routine. The ordinary made sacred through care and presence. You're in the mother stirring lentils, the child warming their hands, the old man poking at the embers before bed. You are the flame that makes a house a home. There's a fringe practice in some rural villages where people leave a bit of honeyed wine by the hearth each night. To keep Hestia sweet, they say, as if you might get cranky without your evening dessert. You don't, of course, but you appreciate the thought, and the wine. Your temples are rare, but your presence is inescapable. Every city has a public hearth dedicated to you, burning day and night, tended by priestesses or civic officials. In emergencies, flood, fire, war, the hearth is protected first, then the people. Because if your flame goes out, the city's soul goes with it. One day, you're watching over a small town in Thessaly. It's not famous. No epic heroes live there. But the people are kind, the bread is good, and the hearth fire is always tended. You like it. A storm rolls in, fierce and sudden. Lightning cracks the sky, rain batters the rooftops. The people scramble to shelter their animals, their grain, their children. But even in the chaos, one old woman runs barefoot through the rain, cloak flapping like a sail, to check the public hearth. She shields the flame with her body, soaked to the bone, arms trembling. She whispers your name. Not a prayer, just a recognition, a reminder. You burn a little brighter. The storm passes. The flame survives. And so does the town. You don't need temples. You have moments like that instead. There's a particular joy in being loved without spectacle. No one feels the need to impress you with grand gestures. You're not the goddess of winning. You're the goddess of staying, of keeping things lit, even when the world is falling apart. Mortals don't fear you. They trust you. which is a rare thing for a god. You've seen how people flinch when they speak Zeus's name too loudly. You've seen how they tiptoe around Poseidon's mood swings, how they offer overly generous sacrifices to Apollo just in case he's having an off day. But with you, they smile. They speak to you like an old friend. Like a grandmother who lives in the walls, watching over the soup pot and keeping the wolves away. One child, in a fishing village far from any palace, once whispered into the hearth, "Thank you for keeping my papa warm." You felt that one for days. Of course, there are always those who forget, who let their hearths grow cold, who think power is only in the thunder, the flood, the sword. But even they come back eventually. Because when the storms pass and the wars end and everyone's tired of shouting, they always return to the fire. To you, and you welcome them. Always. Because you're not here to punish. You're here to remind. That peace is possible. That warmth is sacred. That a steady flame can outlast even the loudest storm. You sit by your hearth on Olympus and feel every flicker of every flame across Greece. You feel the love, the need, the simple gratitude of people who will never know you by face, but know you by warmth. And that, to you, is more enduring than any golden statue. You don't leave Olympus often. Not because you can't, you're a goddess, after all, but because you've made a choice. You're the flame that stays behind, the presence that waits. That reliability is part of your power. But every once in a while, you get curious. So you decide, just once, to visit the mortal world. It's not an official royal tour. No thunderbolts, no entourage, no trumpet-blowing satyrs announcing your arrival. Just you, stepping quietly into the world you've been watching for centuries. And immediately, you regret it. The moment your feet touch the earth, it begins a whirlwind of awkward, overly enthusiastic worship, strange ceremonial dances, and one extremely persistent pig. Let's start with the pig. You arrive in a small village nestled between two rocky hills, where the people still light their hearth fires with flint and patience. You've always liked this place. It's quiet, with the scent of bread in the air and old women who hum as they sweep. You expect to slip in, observe, maybe enjoy a warm cup of something and return to Olympus unnoticed. But the moment your presence is felt, and mortals do feel it, even if they can't explain it, the entire village goes slightly mad. Someone shouts, "Hestia walks among us!" And before you can blink, you're surrounded by people dropping to their knees, offering you everything from cheese wheels to homemade sandals. One child shoves a crust of bread at you with wide, hopeful eyes. You take it because it feels wrong not to. Then comes the pig. A wiry old farmer insists it's a sacred offering, the finest swine in all Thessaly, and herds the animal directly toward you. The pig, sensing confusion, decides to make a break for it. Chaos ensues. People scream. Bread is trampled. Someone lights incense too close to a haystack. And you, the eternal flame, find yourself chasing a squealing pig through the village square while trying to maintain divine dignity. You eventually catch it, not with lightning or divine might, but with a piece of honeyed barley and the world's most patient expression. The villagers erupt into cheers. Someone starts playing a lyre that's only slightly out of tune. You smile, because what else can you do? Historians still argue whether this moment actually happened or was a symbolic tale about divine humility. Fringe scholars love it, of course, insisting that the pig incident is a metaphor for the chaos of mortal life and the quiet grace required to shepherd it. All you know is that pigs are faster than they look. Later, over a quiet meal prepared in your honor, you sit with the villagers and listen to their stories. They speak of burnt stews, forgotten firewood, and the tiny miracles of daily life. One woman leans in and whispers, "I always talk to the hearth. I know it's silly, but it makes me feel heard." You don't say it's not silly. You just nod. Because it does reach you. Every whispered thank you in the firelight, every prayer spoken between stirring soup and tucking in children. They all come to you. Not with fanfare, but with quiet faith. And here's the thing, being on Earth is overwhelming. You're used to Olympus, where the drama is theatrical but predictable. Down here, everything is messy and loud and real. People laugh with their whole chests. They cry in public. They argue over goat prices, and then make up over olives and wine. You're not used to mattering this much. Not as a concept, but as a presence. A group of young girls present you with a wreath of dried herbs. Rosemary, thyme, sage. For your hair, they say, so you always smell like home. You let them place it on your head, and for a moment, you feel like something more than a goddess. You feel human. It's disarming. And a little addictive. But eventually, you know you have to go back. Olympus needs you. The hearth must be tended. And let's be honest, Dionysus has probably turned the break room into a wine cellar again. Before you leave, the village throws one last celebration. They light a great fire in the center of the square using a spark from the hearth in the oldest house. It's glowing bright, warm, and golden, just like you. They dance around it, sing songs in your name, and someone sets the pig free, declaring it blessed by the goddess. The pig immediately eats someone's sandals. You stay until the fire burns low. Then you slip away in the early dawn, unnoticed, leaving behind only warmth and a half-eaten loaf of bread on the windowsill. When you return to Olympus, no one says anything, but Hermes raises an eyebrow and says you smell like pig. You smile. Long story. That's the thing about visiting Earth. Once is enough to remind you why you chose the hearth. Why you stay. Because while the mortal world is beautiful and wild, it's also fragile. It needs anchors. It needs constants. It needs you. Not in a throne, not in a statue, but in every flame that flickers in the dark. You're back on Olympus now. And everything is exactly as chaotic as you expected. The moment you step through the clouds, you're nearly run over by Apollo chasing Hermes over a stolen lyre string. Ares is arguing with Athena about tactical aggression, and Dionysus is trying to convince the muses to collaborate on a wine-inspired opera titled Grape Expectations. You ease back into your place at the hearth with the kind of quiet practiced only by someone who's seen too much to be surprised anymore. The fire greets you, warm and steady, like it missed you. You missed it too. But something strange has started to happen. The mortals are talking about you. Not just in quiet prayers muttered into cooking pots or whispered over winter fires. No, they're debating you. Philosophers, yes, actual toga-wearing, scroll-waving philosophers, are trying to figure out what you mean. Plato, of all people, brings you up in one of his dialogues. He starts talking about the soul, about purity, about the nature of the ideal form, and then he drops your name like a philosophical mic drop. Hestia, he says, is the symbol of the eternal center. You tilt your head. A symbol. You've been called a lot of things, steady, sacred, overlooked, but symbol is new. Historians still argue whether Plato truly believed you were a literal goddess or just an abstract concept wrapped in mythic robes. Some say he revered you. Others think he was trying to sound deep at a symposium after too much wine. Either way, it starts a trend. Soon, every philosopher this side of the Aegean is using your name to make a point. One calls you the philosophical fire of the soul. Another argues that you're not a deity at all, just a metaphor for the hearth of the human psyche. A third writes an entire treatise suggesting that your vow of celibacy represents the untouchable nature of divine truth. You sit by your fire and listen to all this with a bemused expression. It's not offensive exactly. It's just odd. You've never been one for theories. You're more of a do-the-thing kind of goddess. Light the fire, feed the people, keep the peace. You don't need to be dissected like a frog on a marble table. Hermes thinks it's hilarious. You've become an idea, he says, tossing a grape into his mouth. Very on trend. Next thing you know, they'll be using you as a metaphor for taxes. They already have, you reply without looking up. He chokes. Even Athena gets in on it. She sends you a scroll one day, no greeting, no signature, just a single line. The hearth is the axis mundi. Do you agree? You write back, the hearth is where the soup is. She doesn't reply. But here's the thing, the more they talk about you, the more you start to see how you've changed. Or rather, how people's idea of you has changed. You used to be the fire in every home. Now, you're being turned into a cosmic concept. And it's not all bad. There's a quirky fringe group of philosophers who start holding Hestian gatherings. They meet in quiet rooms, light a small fire in the center, and just sit. No debates, no scrolls, no interruptions. Just silence, warmth, and the occasional shared loaf of bread. They say it helps them remember what matters. You like them. But there are others who miss the point entirely. One particularly ambitious scholar writes a thesis claiming that your absence from major myths proves you were invented as a literary device. A placeholder for the idea of domesticity. You don't bother correcting him, but later that night, the fire in his study goes out unexpectedly and refuses to relight for 3 days. Coincidence? Probably. Probably. Still, it's strange, being talked about like you're not real. Like you're too quiet to be divine. Too ordinary to be powerful. But you know better. And so do the people who light their fires with care, who whisper your name when they feel lost, who sit in front of the hearth not because they believe in theories, but because it feels like home. You're not an idea. You're a presence. You're the warmth that never asks for thanks. You're the silence that listens. You're the flame that doesn't need to burn bright to matter. One night, you hear a group of young philosophers arguing again, this time about whether your fire represents the spark of reason or the calm of stillness. You shake your head, smile, and poke the hearth gently. The flame crackles, and for a moment everyone goes quiet. It's been years, centuries maybe, since the last time you paid any attention to war. You've always been more interested in what happens after the battles, the rebuilding, the returning, the quiet sighs of relief, when the fires of violence give way to the fires of home. But one day, the war becomes too loud to ignore. The Trojan War arrives like a thunderclap rolling across the heavens. It isn't your war. Not really. It's Athena's, and Ares, and definitely Aphrodite's. And of course, Zeus is meddling like a kid with a stick near a beehive. The whole thing starts with a beauty contest, because of course it does, and ends with blood, betrayal, and far too many horses for your taste. You don't join the battlefield. You stay where you always do, Olympus, at the hearth. But that doesn't mean you're untouched by the war, because while the other gods are hurling spears and manipulating mortals like chess pieces, someone has to keep Olympus together. Someone has to make sure the fires don't die out while everyone else is off playing war games. You become the goddess of damage control. The divine palace turns chaotic overnight. Ares and Athena glare at each other across the council hall, each convinced they're in the right. Aphrodite flits in daily with updates on her favorite mortal, Paris, and his poor decision-making. Hera paces, muttering about vengeance and strategy. Even Apollo is getting edgy, launching plagues just to make a point. And you're in the kitchen, making sure the ambrosia doesn't curdle. It sounds ridiculous, but it matters, because Olympus runs on more than power. It runs on routine, on order, on small, sacred things like meals and rituals and hearth fires that don't quit just because someone declared war. Historians still debate whether you had any role in the Trojan War at all. Most myths don't mention you, but then again, they rarely do. Some fringe interpretations suggest you acted as an anchor during the chaos, a quiet reminder that not all divine power is flashy or destructive. There's one version, rare, found only in a scrap of papyrus from a forgotten library, that claims you kept a fire burning in a corner of Olympus for the souls of those lost in the war. That every time a hero fell, you whispered their name into the flame. You like that version. Meanwhile, the war drags on. 10 years of blood and broken promises. You listen to the other gods argue about strategies and prophecies, while you stir honey into tea and set out bread no one remembers to eat. One day, Ares storms in, furious over Achilles. Again, he slams his shield down beside your hearth and collapses into a chair with all the grace of a dropped anvil. I don't understand, he growls. Why do they fight so hard? They're mortal. They'll die anyway. You don't say anything at first. Just hand him a cup of something warm. Because, you say finally, they want to return to something worth fighting for. He frowns. What? Home, you say. Peace. A fire that waits for them. He doesn't respond. But he doesn't leave either. You think maybe he understands. For the mortals, war is noise. But home is silence. And you more than anyone know the sacredness of silence. There's a quirky little ritual that springs up during the war year, soldiers lighting a small flame before battle, saying it's for Hestia, so we have something to come back to. It's not sanctioned, not official, just something passed from camp to camp, like a secret hand clasp in the dark. You feel every one of those flames like a thread weaving into your soul, and then comes the end. The horse rolls into Troy, the city burns, the survivors scatter, the victors limp home, broken in ways they can't name, and you wait at your hearth, stirring the coals, lighting new fires, welcoming home the gods who return from war with blood on their hands and silence in their eyes. Athena comes back first, silent and unreadable. You offer her a seat. She doesn't speak, but she doesn't leave either. Aphrodite returns with tear-streaked cheeks, pretending it's from the smoke. Even Ares sits beside the fire, no longer angry, just tired. And when Odysseus finally sails home, when Penelope welcomes him with tears and a hearth fire that never died, you feel it. All the way from Olympus. That warmth. That return. You don't need credit. You just need to know the fire stayed alive. You've always been a Greek goddess, through and through. You know the scent of olive oil on stone, the hush of twilight over the Aegean. the rhythm of sandals pattering down marble steps. But one day everything shifts. Rome calls. It doesn't start with fanfare. It starts with whispers, with priests lighting fires in your name across the sea. Only now those fires speak Latin. They call you Vesta. And just like that, you have a new name. You don't mind. It's a good name, round and soft, like the belly of a clay oven. You've always been adaptable. You were never chained to a temple or tied down by golden thrones. So when the Roman world begins to rise, you rise with it. And what a rise it is. In Greece, you were loved quietly. In Rome, you become essential. They build you a temple in the city's heart, right near the Forum. It's not a massive, towering colossus like some of your siblings get. It's small, round, and perfect. Inside, a sacred fire burns day and night, never allowed to go out. Sound familiar? The Romans take your flame seriously. Like seriously. They appoint a group of priestesses, young women chosen from noble families, to tend your fire. They are the Vestal Virgins, and they serve you for 30 years. 30 years. That's longer than some emperors manage to stay alive. They wear white robes and veils, walk with calm dignity, and carry the weight of your flame like it's the pulse of the empire, which, in a way, it is. Because in Rome, your fire becomes more than domestic warmth. It becomes the soul of the state. If the flame goes out, it's seen as a bad omen, like earthquakes and assassinations kind of bad. So the Vestals watch it like hawks. Soft, pious hawks. You're proud of them. Historians still argue whether the Vestal Order was a political tool, a religious institution, or something in between. Some say it was a way to control noble families, send their daughters to serve and keep them loyal. Others say it was a genuine act of reverence for you, a holdover from a time when hearths were sacred, and so was the silence around them. Whatever the reason, the Vestals are fiercely respected. They have privileges no other women in Rome can dream of: front row seats at games, their own carriages, even the power to pardon prisoners just by touching them. If a Vestal crosses the street, everyone makes way. But there's a catch. Vestal virgins must remain celibate. Break that vow, and it's not just scandal, it's sacrilege. The punishment. Buried alive. Yes, really. The Romans don't mess around when it comes to you. You're not exactly thrilled about the whole burying people alive part. But you understand the symbolism. The fire must remain pure. The center must be untouched. You didn't ask for such extremes, but mortals have always had a flair for the dramatic. Still, you watch over them. Your Vestals. You see them grow from nervous girls to wise women. You see them light the morning fires, whisper prayers in your name, teach others how to tend the flame just right. You see them leave after 30 years, honored and forever changed. One of them, Licinia, is your favorite. She sings when she thinks no one's listening. She touches the flame like it's a living thing. One night, she sits alone by the hearth and says, "I think you're lonely sometimes." You don't answer, but you make the fire flicker in response. She smiles. There's a quirky practice that starts in Licinia's time. Roman brides lighting a torch from your sacred flame before their wedding, then carrying it home to light their new hearth. It's symbolic, of course, but also practical. Your fire is steady. It doesn't sputter. People believe it brings luck and warmth and long-lasting marriages. You hope they're right. And while the rest of Olympus fades from Roman memory, Zeus becomes Jupiter, Hera becomes Juno, myths get rewritten like old plays, you remain remarkably unchanged. Your name shifts, but your essence stays the same. You are the flame, quiet, central, eternal. The emperors rise and fall, the senate bickers, legions march, but the fire in your temple burns, steady and soft, like a heartbeat under the marble skin of a city. One day, the Vestals relight the flame after a heavy rainstorm. The high priestess kneels, soaked to the bone, whispering your name with bare hands outstretched. You warm her fingers with a single, perfect spark. Not everyone notices you, but the ones who do, they never forget. You feel it before it happens. A shift in the air, not like wind, but like a silence that's too deep. Like someone has stopped saying your name mid-prayer and forgotten to finish. Rome is changing. You've seen cities rise and fall before, of course. Empires come and go. Mortals build, then burn, then build again. But this is different. It's not just one city or one war. It's a slow, creeping quiet, a cultural hush, a fire going out not with a bang, but with a sigh. The Christians are rising. At first, it's whispers. New gods, new rituals, new ideas. A carpenter's son from the east, preaching love and sacrifice and a single, all-seeing deity. At first you think, well, good for him. There's always room for more warmth in the world. But then temples start to close, statues are toppled, offerings dwindle, fires go untended, and one day the unthinkable happens. The sacred flame in your Roman temple, the one that has burned without interruption for centuries, is extinguished. Just like that. No ceremony, no final prayer, just a decree from a distant emperor, now Christian, declaring your worship obsolete. Historians still argue whether the final extinction of your flame in 391 CE marked the end of pagan Rome or merely its rebranding. Some say it was symbolic, others say it was bureaucratic. But to you it feels like a door closing slowly, softly, with no one watching. You don't rage, you don't strike down cities or rain curses. That's never been your way. You just sit beside the hearth on Olympus and feel the absence. It's not painful, not exactly, just hollow. Like someone moved out of a house and left the furniture behind. Even the gods around you start to fade. Some vanish into legend, others rebrand themselves, reshaped by time, folded into new stories. Hermes becomes a trickster spirit. Athena gets filtered through saintly archetypes. Ares disappears entirely, like a bad idea someone finally stopped repeating. But you remain. Not because people remember your name, but because they remember what you meant. Because no matter how many altars are torn down, people still light fires, still gather around warmth, still teach the children that the hearth is sacred, even if they no longer know why. There's a fringe theory among modern scholars that you never truly disappeared, that you were absorbed into other traditions. The Virgin Mary, they say, carries echoes of you. The virginal protector, the quiet mother, the sacred center. Others argue your spirit lives in the kitchen gods of various cultures, in folklore about house spirits and fire guardians, in every superstition that says, never let the fire go out. Sometimes, people light a candle and place it in the window for a traveler to find their way. Sometimes they keep a lamp burning through the night, because it feels right. They don't say your name, but you're there. You're always there. There's a small village in the mountains. No temples, no priests, no scrolls. Just stone houses and chilly winters. One night, an old woman lights the hearth for the last time that season. She's alone. Her family moved away years ago, but she still lights the fire. She sits beside it, hands in her lap, and says softly, "Thank you, whoever you are." You feel that one. Not like thunder, more like a heartbeat, not gone, just quieter. And that's okay, because you were never about the noise. You were never about the statues or the songs or the gold. You were about the warmth, the presence, the stillness that says, this is home. So as the world moves on, as new gods rise and old ones fade, you remain, not as a name, but as a feeling. You are the candle in the dark room, the bonfire at the end of grief, the stove where soup simmers while someone waits for news. You are the whisper that says, it's okay. You're not alone. You don't need temples anymore. You have kitchens and fireplaces and campfires under stars. You have every place where someone lights a flame and feels safe. And that lasts longer than marble. The centuries pass, they don't rush. They drift, like smoke rising from a dying fire. Time softens everything. The sharp edges of war, the clamour of politics, the names once shouted from rooftops and carved into stone. All of it fades. But you're still here. Not in the way you used to be, perhaps. You don't have temples crowned with wreaths or processions bearing garlands in your name. No high priestess calls down your blessing in candlelit ceremonies. Your sacred flame in Rome is long extinguished, your name barely a whisper in the world of gods and myths. But you've never needed a spotlight to shine. You've always been the background warmth, the steady hush in a noisy world. And in this new world, this modern, fast, flashing, digital world, you've taken a new form. You flicker in apartment windows and glow behind glass oven doors. You burn in the crackling fire pits of suburban backyards, in the orange light of campfires where stories are still told. You're in the candles lit at vigils, in the gas heater humming softly in a winter cabin, in the spark of a lighter held up during a concert ballad that suddenly, unexpectedly, makes someone think of home. You're not forgotten. You're transformed. There's a family in a snow-covered town, doesn't matter where, gathered around a fireplace. A grandmother tells her grandchildren, in the old days, we believe there was a spirit in the fire who watched over the home. She doesn't remember your name, but she remembers the idea, the comfort, the presence. You're okay with that. Historians still argue whether gods like you faded entirely or simply evolved into archetypes, echoes in the collective subconscious. But you felt it. Every time someone lights a candle to grieve, or to hope, or just to make the room feel less empty, you're there. You've become something deeper than worship. You've become instinct. And maybe that's the greatest immortality of all. You walk through the world now as a shadow, a breath of heat, a memory triggered by the scent of burning wood. No one sees you, but they feel you. That's always been enough. There's a girl in a city where winter bites hard. She lives alone, the kind of alone that echoes. One night, she lights a candle just to have something warm in the room. She stares into the flame, and without knowing why, she feels calmer. She doesn't pray. She doesn't know to, but in that quiet, golden moment, you are there. And in that moment, you realize something. You've finally gotten what you always wanted. Peace. Not the kind that comes from isolation, but the kind that blossoms when nothing more is needed. When the fire is lit, the room is still, and the world outside can wait. You don't need thrones or temples or titles. You are the hearth. You are the home that follows people wherever they go. You are the first light in the morning and the last warmth before sleep. You are still here, still warm, still waiting, and always, always burning.